excited. I'm going to try not to stand here too long. I like to move around, but I forgot my little clicker, so I'll keep coming back over to the podium. But I know some of you have to leave, and I know I can talk and talk and talk, so I'm going to try to get us started here. So first, I wanted to give you a little sense of the places I've been. Nia mentioned some of them, and talk about my identity, how I see myself, how others see me, and how those experiences have kind of shaped the woman I am today, and still forming and still have a lot of learning and growing to do. So I started out in Tennessee. I'll talk about the University of Tennessee. Anybody been to Knoxville, Tennessee? Yay! I know Jack has a special connection and wearing his orange tie today too. University of Maryland. Anybody been to Terpland? Yay! Where I fell in love at Maryland, so it's always got a special place in my heart. Virginia Tech, where I spent a year there. I'll talk about that. Nia talked about I was faculty first at the University of Vermont, so that'll always be kind of where I started my faculty career. And then Seattle introduced me to the Jesuits, and I hope to be with them for a while. This is a quote that I started thinking about when I was a doctoral student at Maryland, and thinking about finding out that there's not that many African Americans getting their Ph.D., there's not that many African Americans then being faculty members, there's not that many women faculty members, which I'll talk a little bit about. And so how do you see yourself as less than 3% or less than 1% of a population? What does that do to your psyche is some of the things I'm going to talk about today. But also there's great power in the identities that I do have, more so than being a woman and being an African American. So I'm going to talk about how I've tried to use my power and my privilege in my career. So where I started from, a lot of people, when they see I went to Tennessee or Maryland, like, where's the Southern accent, right? I don't have one. I grew up in Lexington, Massachusetts. Anybody know who the statue is? No history buffs in the room? It's kind of hard to see with the lights, sun shiny bright today. The British are coming, the British are coming. Is that helping? Yes, so Paul Revere. So very colonial town. In my downtown, you're not allowed to have any homes that aren't white with black shutters. There is still the greenery. They still reenact the Battle Green every year. My dad, who's the only one I could get up early in the morning to do the pancake breakfast after the Battle Green. So no Walmart to speak of, maybe one gas station, no big superstores, no Target. I grew up with one little movie theater that showed 2 movies. It's actually in a movie with Matt Damon. If you want to find out, I can talk to you about it later. They went to that movie theater. I'm really into movies as well. So Lexington High School, I left there middle of my junior year to move, and it was a pretty traumatic move. If anybody's ever moved in the middle of high school, I tried to beg my parents to let me stay, and they said absolutely not. You have to come with us. But I was very, very much into Lexington, Massachusetts. It's a lot of foundational things for me, and one I wanted to talk about in particular was the METCO program, which I've been doing this in my social justice class a little bit, thinking about what's one kind of really pivotal experience that I've had in my life that shaped how I look at race, how I look at socioeconomic class, how I look at my identity as a woman, and it was the METCO program. Anybody heard of the METCO program before? It particular to Massachusetts, but as I talk about it, it might be something that you had in your town growing up. I'm going to reveal my age, which I don't mind doing. I'm 38 years old, and so I was born in 1973. Thanks for saying I'm young. I appreciate that. In 1966, so a little bit before I was born, this METCO program started. And what essentially did was wake a bunch of kids up, 3,300 this year, getting up around 5 in the morning, and getting on a bus and traveling to a nice suburban school that's got that graduation rate that I mentioned before in Lexington. There's no suburban kids that are getting up at 5 a.m. and shuffling into Dorchester or Roxbury or Boston, but it's all the other way. So what this meant for me was I was one of the few black kids that was in Lexington, in the town, when these students would come. And my mother would say, well, it's much easier for them to have negative feeling towards you, the small few black folks that are in the town, than to all the white faculty and all the white students that were there. So what that meant for my sisters and I was we got bullied on a daily basis. We were told not to talk to them, that we couldn't be friends with them, that we should not date any of their, this is elementary school, right? But date any members of the MECO program. I was terrified. I was not the wonderful person you see before me. I was this little scrawny, skinny kid, and I was terrified about getting punched in the face or slammed up against a locker, and lived my life just really in fear in elementary school and middle school. Finally, in high school, we got older and mature and became friends, but it was a little rough going. And what that did to my psyche was I didn't like being black. I didn't think I was black because these images before me, we listened to different music, we had different hairstyles, we lived in different towns. They would go home on the bus at 3 o'clock, where I would live in the town from 3 until midnight and wake up in the town. They weren't around on weekends, they weren't around to do parties. So it was this very interesting isolation where I did not see myself connected to those folks at all. We were very different socioeconomic backgrounds. The ones who did get to stay were the ones in sports. I wasn't into sports, I'm not very athletic, so I didn't connect around that. So again, for your own story, thinking about pivotal experiences that really kind of shape where you go from there. So getting back to my story, I was abruptly moved from Lexington to Knoxville, Tennessee, and my parents said we were going to Tennessee. I thought of haystacks and rolling hills, and I didn't really know what to expect about Knoxville, Tennessee. But very adaptable person as part of my personality, and absolutely loved it, and really made a lot of friends, and my parents still live there, and I enjoy going back there quite a bit. But the middle of my junior year in high school, I had to go to another school. And so I was going to this great public school in Lexington, and I thought, I'll go to a great public school in Knoxville, Tennessee. Turns out that they weren't very comparable. I spent a week there, and my dad said, are you learning anything? And I stupidly, right, said, no, I'm not learning anything. Which I, then I went to a really hard school. I went to a private school called the Webb School of Knoxville. And got pretty much a comparable education from what I'd been getting in Lexington, but it was a very big switch then to go to this Webb school. I remember there's this long winding road to get back to the school. When you finally got to the parking lot, students were coming in Porsches and Mercedes, and I'm not very good with material cars. I have a Toyota Prius, but nice, really nice cars. And I was in my mom's, I think, Maxima, or getting dropped off by my parents. And students were talking about going to their beach houses for spring break, or going abroad over the summer, which I had done neither at that time. And so there was another big socioeconomic class mix, except this time these people were all white, and there was about 5 black students across classes, across the high school, as a lower school and upper school. In fact, I remember one day, the 5 of us, because our parents were friends, it's a very small town, we're all walking up the hill talking. And the headmaster ran over to us and said, is everything okay? What are you guys doing? Is there going to be a riot? Or are you guys going to be picketing? What's going on? Nope, just talking about classes, talking about normal things. But it was a very isolating experience being at that school as well. Then I went to the University of Tennessee for college, and I put the UT football there. I'm a big football fan. I love college football and professional football. Unfortunately, my new life as a mom doesn't allow me to get as many games in as I used to. But a story about Tennessee, I was on my way to the library freshman year. It's a Saturday morning, and I'm trying to open the door and just getting nothing. And somebody's like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just trying to go to the library. It's a football day. The library's closed. Get yourself to the game. It's like, oh, okay. The whole town pretty much, has many ever been there for a football game? The whole town just shuts down, and it is all centered on football or basketball, for any Bathead Summit fans, women's basketball fans in the house. So that got me thinking about education, and again, that schooling I'd tried to go to public school in Tennessee, and then going to the public university in Tennessee. Again, how important is education in this state? I'm not getting a good sense of that. I did not join a sorority, much to my parents' chagrin. Both my parents are Greek, but I remember thinking there's this huge row of fraternity houses on campus. Where are the sorority houses? I see some women in floors of residence halls, and they said, oh, we can't have women's sorority houses. Anybody know why? Some of my students? They're considered brothels. And I thought, oh my gosh, what would happen if women had a house together? You know, what would they do? What kind of subversive things could they do on this campus? And the men are allowed to have fraternity houses, but women still aren't allowed to have sorority houses. So I started, again, early thinking about sexism and women's issues and hadn't really thought of that. It hasn't been a prominent part of my identity before I went to Tennessee. Then I went to College Park. It's a beautiful campus. If you've never been to Maryland, as I said, I fell in love there, so I'm a little biased about the school, but I absolutely love the campus. And even though it's below the Mason-Dixon line as well as Tennessee, when I was there, it was about 40% students of color. So I had this huge awakening of race. Became this really prominent, if you remember my story before about not feeling really good about myself as a black person. That completely changed at Maryland. I started to see black professors, black students, black staff, black professionals just driving in their BMWs to work on the expressway. Doctors, had a black doctor, lawyers, and this whole just infusion of DC and Baltimore, the surrounding cities from College Park. And had my first black professor there and just decided, wow, this is a new career opportunity. I'd never considered this opportunity before because I've never had a black professor. I took African American Studies as an undergrad at Tennessee, and I had a white graduate student, and I was like, oh, what can I do to get a black professor? So Maryland was a huge turning point for me. I went through racial identity development, all of the stages. If you've ever read any of Janet Helm's work, Janet Helms was actually on campus as a faculty member at Maryland when I was there. So it was, again, a really pivotal time for me. Moving on, so again, remember this new racialized woman, I'm like black power. I stopped getting my hair straightened. I stopped getting chemicals put in my hair. My hair was in this weird growing out stage from the chemicals to the non-chemicals. Thankfully, they're all out now. And so I then went to Blacksburg, Virginia to finish up my dissertation, which was on racial identity development, women's racial identity development. So I tried to combine what I'd learned from Tennessee and Maryland. And I got to Virginia Tech to do a postdoc. They offered me at that time what I thought was a lot of money. It was like $20,000 to come, finish my dissertation and teach a couple classes for a year. And I thought, wow, this is more money than I've ever made in my life. And I get to finish my dissertation and I get to start teaching, which is what I wanted to do now. So a great program at Virginia Tech, great faculty there. But as I started to walk around campus, I started to wonder where I had come. Huge Confederate flags on people's barns on the way to campus. Then I get onto campus. There's a working plantation on campus, so I got a picture of that for you. And then when I was getting that picture, I saw this, which reminded me of one of the first news stories. I turned on my TV. I allowed myself 2 channels. Like fuzzy channels. There was like Channel 8, local news, and Channel 6, because I was writing my dissertation, right? And I told you I like movies and TV, so I couldn't even have it come into my house. I had to be very strict with myself. So my little channel, I'm having dinner on my little futon, and I see this story come on the news about a missing pig. And they're looking for the pig, and I'm like, this is very different from the world I just left of Maryland and DC and Baltimore and black professionals. And I also got this picture because this pig is on, can anybody read that, where that event is taking place? Plantation Road in Blacksburg, Virginia. So again, having just left Maryland and having this racial awakening and thinking about slaves and slavery and working plantations, I was terrified when I got to Virginia Tech. I would go home at night and I would lock my double head door. I remember Rob dropped me off with a friend, and I was like, don't leave me here. I can't believe you're going to leave me here. I was just terrified, and I just spent 12 hours a day just writing. I wrote 600-page dissertation, which is way too long for any doctoral students out there. But I just wrote, and I was writing about race and women, and I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and watched my little TV, and was very happy to leave there and get cable, and I have the works now. I've got 600 channels. And, so that's a little bit about my education in Blacksburg, which may surprise people. So I'm telling you how scared I was in Blacksburg. I couldn't get my hair done. I'd have to drive either to my parents' house in Tennessee to get my hair done or back to College Park to get my hair done. I was constantly on the road and one of the weekends. So why would I go there and then go to Burlington, Vermont? People kind of always puzzle when I tell them that. I had to get out of Blacksburg, and I ran to the wonderful Burlington, Vermont, which is absolutely beautiful. So what got me was I got there in April, and if you've ever been to Burlington, Vermont, and the University of Vermont, the university sits on a hill, and right down from the bottom of the hill you can see the Lake Champlain, which New York is on the other side, and it's absolutely beautiful, and they've got all these great shops downtown, like the Gap and Chico's, one of my favorite stores, and things I'd heard of before. Place to get my hair done even. I had a great hairdresser when I was in Burlington, Vermont. But it's 96% white, and also white in snow. I put the picture of the snow there because one day I remember going out to get in the mail and having my nose kind of freeze and having to close my mouth. I realized I smile a lot and my teeth were freezing. And at one point it was 30 below for over a month. And I was like, what are we doing here? We have no family here. What are we doing here? We had a great family that we created of faculty and students and staff at Vermont, but it decided that we were giving a lot more institution than we were giving back. Students would say, oh, Bridget, I saw you at the bank this morning, and then I saw you at the grocery store, and then I saw you walking to your car, and I know it was you because I know all the black people here, and I saw Sheila earlier, so it must have been you. Or people calling me some other staff person's name, people that I'd worked with and known for years. And I was like, wow, you really just see the dark. Nothing else kind of registers, no distinguishing characteristics on my face or my hair or anything. So Vermont was a hard place. It was a great place to start my career, but it was a hard place to live as a black woman. So we went to Seattle, Washington. Again, no family, which is why many of you in the room have babysat my kids because I need to extend a village of people to help take care of our brood. But really fell in love with the Jesuit mission of education, and for the first time felt like I could walk around and people wouldn't be tracking my every move and know what I was doing on a daily basis. I could blend in somewhat. Seattle University was much more diverse in terms of students and faculty and staff than the University of Vermont. The Jesuit Catholic mission was something that I really resonated with, but also something that I really challenged people around. The social justice issue, and when I found out about the Jesuits, how they were, and my students know this because I talk about it a lot probably, put into these cities, right, to serve the community and to be a part of the community. So all 28 are in cities, Detroit and Chicago and New York City, and if you've ever been to Fordham, Fordham was the first conference I went to, the Jesuit conference that they do every 5 years on a campus. And there's this huge gate around Fordham, right? And you're like, what's the gate for? I thought we were supposed to be here for the community, you know? And then as I've been around to a number of them, discovering that, well, we're not interested in educating the community so much now anymore. It's more about educating people that can then go and serve the community. And so we've distanced ourselves a little bit. And so I always push back with the Jesuits because that's not what I fell in love with when I first found out about the Jesuit Catholics. I also pushed back around women's issues. I was president of the Women's Commission. The university had a women's commission at the University of Vermont. And my president at the time, is no longer the president there, it's women's issues. Like, I thought we burned bras in the 60s and we're all done with that. Why are we still talking about these issues? And so at least we could talk about them there, but when I got to Seattle, it felt like it was just a heavy load to push up the hill. race people wanted to talk about, were engaged about, but the minute you talked about women leadership, women presidents, and the Jesuits, since they are priests, how can we have a woman president of a Jesuit university? So that was a conversation that continued to kind of haunt me. My partner is there with his parents, in case you're wondering who's in the picture. We're all in our Seattle U gear. Those colors are much more flattering to me than the Loyola, but I'm trying to get some Loyola gear. So I want to move on. I've talked a little bit about my main two identities that I think about quite often in the context of education. My race, being 4.7% African American faculty at predominantly white institutions. Black women's about 3%. So again, what does that mean to be 3% of a population and feeling like I have a huge responsibility to help others think about this as a career, to educate others, to be that person that someone could say, huh, I never thought about a faculty member, but I think I could maybe do that. And then my sex. As a woman, I study women faculty, and so to think that there's only 30% women faculty, which I think is hard for a lot of us in the room, maybe in the arts and sciences education. Well, I've had all women teachers. What are you talking about? When we look at universities on a mass scale, so talking about science and business and communications and other kind of fields where women really face a chilly climate, to think about, yeah, there's only 30%, but we are more than half the population. We are more than half the students who are getting their undergraduate degrees, master's degrees, doctoral degrees. So what's happening where we're not hitting over that ceiling of being women faculty? And when we are faculty, we tend to be lecturers, we tend to be assistant professors, and we tend not to be associates or full. So one of my goals now is to become a full professor at some point. One of my lessons of today is you can have it all, just not at the same time, right? So when I'm not mired down in what I know is the busiest time of being a mother, I hope to make that my next goal. But that's just part of me. Those are only two small aspects of what makes up, I think, a pretty multifaceted person. So I wanted to kind of close with the rest of it. I'm Christian. I consider myself non-denominational, but Christian nonetheless, and this is a society that really values believers. I didn't mention it before. When I was at school in Lexington, Massachusetts, very Jewish town, so we got off all the Jewish holidays, and I thought that everybody got off all the Jewish holidays, right? And then coming to different schooling systems, finding out, no, all of our calendar is really based on this Christian calendar, and president still puts his hand on a Bible, and he's sworn into office. So really in a place where I am privileged being a Christian in the society. My socioeconomic class is middle class. I just really feel like this lately with the media talking about the tax cuts and the economy. I don't know if this is what keeps me up at night. Maybe it doesn't concern you so much, but as I keep hearing this rhetoric around, how can we not tax these rich people, right? So we can give back to the middle class. We can't tax the middle class, and we can't tax the lower class. So thinking about, I am in a class that is very privileged in society, that it's okay to talk publicly about helping out this class, not about helping out the lower class who can help themselves, and not about helping out the rich who have too much, but I'm in this protected class of people, and what that, again, does to my psyche. My education, I have my doctorate. I was always told to get my terminal degree. I remember finishing up my bachelor's degree. I got my bachelor's degree in communications and public relations, and the thought of just supporting someone and helping a company get better and better just didn't really appeal to me as it graduated, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I remember my dad and I going on a walk, and he's saying, well, you can be a doctor. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I don't like science. I don't like math. I don't like blood. It's just not gonna work out for me. All right, well, you can be a lawyer. Well, you guys, some of you may be too young. Maybe remember the paper chase. You don't have to raise your hand if you don't want to show your age. But there was this TV show on at the time, this paper chase show, and it had this really demanding professor, and he would just berate people, and they would try to look up the law, and they would answer. And I love shows about professors, and they would try to look for answer, and I was like, no, I don't want to go to law school. I don't want to be a lawyer. No, thank you. Not interested. He's like, well, you need to get your terminal degree. Whatever field you do, you need to go all the way to the top. And so I was like, well, what did you do? well, I have my doctorate from Indiana University. I know there's at least one Indiana University person, a couple people. I neglected that part of my story because we only have so much time, but I was born in Bloomington, Indiana, and lived on that campus with my parents. So Dad has his doctorate in education, and my mom's got her master's from Indiana as well. She's a licensed clinical social worker, which my dad always laments that my mother never went on and got her doctorate. She's like, I didn't want my doctorate. I didn't need my doctorate. So I am the one out of the 3 children in my family that went on and got my doctorate. So a lot of cultural capital from my education, from my parents' education. My sexual orientation, I consider myself heterosexual. And really, if you want to go coffee or tea, I don't do coffee really, but tea or lunch, I can talk to you about how I've explored that throughout my life. But we are definitely in a society that still privileges that. The federal government only recognizes different sex marriages, and so thinking about calling my partner, and why I do that, and the kind of conversations I've been able to have with people because I do that. And having my sister, when she was 40, come out to me and be able to tell me, well, I could tell you because I've seen you, and I've seen how you've reacted all these times growing up, and I knew you'd be fine with it. But it was harder for me to tell other people in my family. And so to have that privilege, but to be in a place where I could share that, and be in a place where my sister could say, I know you love me, and I know you will love me no matter what, just really speaks, if I can get one message across today, about you never know who's watching you. You never know how they're listening to you. But she'd been watching for 20, 30 years, somebody that close. And to have her say, I thought I was going to commit suicide when I was younger. I knew something was wrong. Didn't know what it was. Thank God we have a licensed clinical social worker in the house who talked to her numerous times. And when she finally put it together, I remember she was in the car with my parents, and my dad, you're 40 years old. Give me a break. When are you going to get married? When are you going to find a partner? What's a man got to do? And my sister said, well, first of all, it wouldn't be a man. And she said, my mother, without missing a beat, well, what would a woman have to do? And so to be in that kind of family, really, really, I always tell my students, if you can advocate for something that is not a part of your identity, it really opens up space for people, because some people are not in a space where they can have that voice. But because of your privilege and your power, you can advocate for any number of things. And so that's one of the things that I really try to advocate for and use my privilege and my power. And then lastly, I want to have some time for questions. I know people have to leave and go to other meetings, but I want to open up the floor for questions and dialogue, and thanks for this opportunity. I love talking about myself. I'm a professor, right? I love talking about myself. So thanks for the opportunity.